Okay, welcome everybody. So happy to see everyone in this wonderful room. Um, so I sort of, when I discussed what sort of thing I might talk about this year, I thought about the sort of big picture, seafood and humankind. Well, and so we'll start at the biggest picture I could think of, which is a bit of a quiz. And the quiz is, what's the most important scientific problem? So could it be climate change? Well, that one's way up there. We're aware of that. That's a big one. And population increase, that's a big one. We have to think about that. And what if a giant asteroid was headed for the Earth? We want to do something about that, right? But then also, how about building the most effective brains? Well, how do you decide between these various things? Any scientist will tell you that the most important problem is the one they're working on at the moment. But if I change the question a little bit and I say, on what solution do all problems depend for their solutions, I think it's building the most effective brains. So I think that one is probably the most important, at least by one way of thinking about all this. So when I think about, now I'm an amateur when it comes to the details of how the brain works. I know something about it, but I'm certainly no psychiatrist. You're going to hear from psychiatrists today. I think of it as two domains. One is intelligence and sort of problem solving. You can call it IQ. And another is sort of mood and balance. So you're not depressed, you're not manic, you're kind of somewhere in the middle so that you can use all those IQ points. And so we need both of those things to be right. And many of us who've been in the field for years think about those nutrients that build the brain, brain selective nutrients. That's a book that was published by an old friend, Stephen Cunnane, some years ago, called Survival of the Fattest, and he thinks about that as being the key to human brain evolution. What is in seafood? Well, seafood has famously omega-3s, DHA for instance, but iodine, zinc, copper, selenium. Deficiencies of iodine and iron cause cognitive impairment. Iodine and selenium deficiency are widespread inlet. They're rare on the shore, very rare on the shore, or almost non-existent. And also, brain function and development is a high energy activity, and that is available in ample shore-based foods, at least over our ancestry, let's say. So some years ago, I was led to consider this whole question, at least in the context of the experimental animal studies that had been done, and this was this a decade ago. And if you look at a list of brain characteristics, behavioral characteristics that have been examined in experimental animals in the context of omega-3 deficiency, as an example, you see a long list of issues, and some of those issues are, for instance, oh, I'm sorry, wrong way. Okay, let's see. Laser, okay, laser, good. You see a long list of issues, and many of these issues are related to IQ, maze learning, motor development, but you also see mood issues, so aggression, anxiety, impulse control. Does that sound like some of the things that might be important to a properly functioning human society? I think they are. And some of these have been investigated, many of them actually, in human studies of omega-3, EPA, and DHA studies. Now, one question that one can ask is, what about the marine food chain? Was this important to human evolution? Is this something that was important to our ancestors? This is, many of you will recognize an old friend, Michael Crawford, and he was up in Scotland, in nearby Edinburgh, in a place called the Firth of Forth, which is a body of water which is a body of water, and he picked this up, and I'll read it to you. Off the Pentland Firth, the sea was 1/3 water and 2/3 fish. The operation of taking them could hardly be called fishing, for they did little more than dip for them into the water and take them up. The shoreline was a rich nutrient bank, and we think perhaps that this is one of the keys. And this was observed in 1705. Probably not the same now, but that doesn't mean that it isn't important. And Sir David Attenborough, who I think is still a rock star as he's approaching, I don't know, a few years away from his 100th birthday, has also taken this up. And we talk about, and I'll just make a comment about iodine deficiency, which is important. Now, most people recognize that worldwide iodine is a required nutrient in salt, and sodium chloride as our table salt. And that really masks a major deficiency inland, actually. And that is manifest by goiters, and goiters, which are these larger thyroid glands, which manifest in an obvious way as a result of iodine deficiency. And again, goiters are rare in populations near coastlines and water. And I think we may be better off in thinking of this as a seafood deficiency. And that is, we have lots of population, we have billions of people living inland and who are at risk for seafood deficiency as manifested and now masked by iodine enrichment in salt. So let's see, where am I going? Okay, so now I want to tell you a little bit more about omega-3 DHA, and one of the reasons is that it's a very well-studied example. I like to point out that, that many of us came to this story of brain developments through studies of omega-3 fatty acids, but that doesn't make us one-trick ponies. We recognize other nutrients, many other nutrients, but omega-3 DHA, of which there are something on the order of 40,000 papers over the many years it's been studied, also is a rich area. So in many studies in humans, the duration of DHA has been supplemented, and that's a story that has been around for some years, and we have some of the pioneers in the audience, showing that if you feed babies DHA, that their brain development is accelerated, and this is one of my favorite examples, which is visual development. People think about visual development as just vision, but it really isn't in babies. It's brain development. The development of the overall neural system is why vision improves with DHA. And I'll just, in the interest of time, I won't go into any more detail in this one, other than to say that the more DHA kids have in their first year of life, the better their vision. Now, I want to tell you about a study that we just published this year that had important implications and has been incorporated into some world food policy, and this concerns children in the African country of Malawi, where malnutrition is widespread. And to treat malnutrition, children are administered what's called a ready-to-use therapeutic food, which is based on peanuts and non-fat dry milk and oil and sugar and lots of vitamins and minerals. And our survival rates, you might have heard of a product called Plumpy Nut, which was among the first, but there are many others. And the survival rates of kids upon the introduction of these foods more than 15 years ago went from roughly 50% to well over 90%. But that's survival of the body. What about the brain? And just a couple words about severe acute malnutrition. This is almost certainly a small number, 17 million kids under 5 years of age. And not only is it causes illness, but also it is deadly. Um, and even the kids who do survive have impaired cognitive development later on. In 2015, we published a paper showing that the conventional recipes that were used for these ready-to-use therapeutic foods, and there is a child with a packet of this food, and she can consume it by herself, and she looks very happy doing that. But the conventional recipe for these ready-to-use foods had very high amounts of omega-6, and that's a story we've talked about a lot over the years in the context of fat nutrition and omega-3 nutrition. And what we realized as the first people to measure this is that in only 4 weeks, their circulating omega-3 DHA dropped by 25%, which is kind of a stunning drop in only 4 weeks. Now, these children eat nothing but this diet over this period. Once they're diagnosed, they're given these packets, and they eat nothing but that, and their DHA dropped dramatically. So when we reformulated it to reduce the amount of omega-6 and really put a little more omega-3, but no DHA, the kids were able to stabilize their DHA levels. That's their circulating DHA levels, and they were able to actually make that DHA endogenously in their bodies. So that was a biochemical study, and that sort of told us that there's probably something going on in the brain. So after quite a bit of effort, we managed to find some support to do a large-scale study. And this study involved 2,800 kids, 1,000 of whom we tested for their mental development. And again, this is Malawi, and these are some of the symptoms and so forth. My collaborator, many collaborators, and I, Mark does all the work here. Mark Beneri at Wash U does all the real work. He's a pediatrician. And I'll share with you the results that were published this year in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, which the reference is up there. In this study, we evaluated severe acute malnutrition. We feed the kids for between 4 and 12 weeks until they begin to rehabilitate. That is, their upper arm circumference increases to above a certain threshold. And when it has increased above that threshold, we send them home. We send them back, and they're done. But we brought them back after roughly 6 months. After 6 months, no intervention in that period. And when we looked at the Malawi Developmental Assessment Tool, we found that there was a significant improvement in those kids that got a ready-to-use therapeutic food with, we say high oleic, but that would be low omega-6, but also with some added DHA, and that was significant. It was most significant in the individual components in gross motor and social. And the social domain, interestingly, even the high oleic alone, this one had only low omega-6 and no DHA, but in that domain was actually one of the better ones. And I want to show you just what some of those components are quickly. These are a series, and I know you can't read that, but I'll show you something on the next slide. These are all various performance characteristics, and let me just go straight to that next slide. And I've pulled a few of them off of here to give you an idea of what we're measuring here. And I've able to greet either by extending hand or verbally, that should say. Understand sharing, and will do so with friends. Shows independence, wants to go visit a friend's house. How to keep quiet in important meetings and ceremonies. I think that's a big one socially, huh? Understanding the concept of discipline, and that's one of consequences in terms of discipline, and then being respectful to elders. So this is social coherence to me. This is enhancing social coherence, and it was particularly good in this domain. I just returned from, and I just have 2 slides, I just returned from New York, where the World Economic Forum is beginning to think about what they're calling societal resilience, and they're talking about nutrition as improving societal resilience. I think probably seafood is going to be a key to this. And they've also talked about the concept of learning poverty. That's the other side of the IQ versus mood story. And I think maybe, and I'll leave you with Barbara McClintock, who won the Nobel Prize in 1983 and has to be in the short list of the most important geneticists of the 20th century. And with this quote, she says, "Over the years, I have found that it is difficult, if not impossible, to bring to the consciousness of another person the nature of his tacit assumptions won by some special experiences." She means by her experiments, her science. "I have been made aware of them." And she ends, "One must await the right time for conceptual change." And I hope perhaps this is the time where we're seeing more and more about mental resilience and even societal resilience, that the world is taking this up. So thank you very much for your attention, and we'll move on with the program.